Hi, I'm Amy Goodman. In this time of COVID-19, climate chaos, and historic elections, you count on Democracy Now! To stay focused on the issues that matter most. We count on you to support our independent journalism. If everyone who tunes in to Democracy Now! Gave just $10, we could cover our operating costs for 2021. Really, that's all it would take. Please do your part today by visiting us at democracynow.org. Stay safe. Wear a mask, save lives. And thank you so much. From New York, this is Democracy Now!
We need an economy where people are not just getting by, but they get the opportunity to thrive. We need an economy where people can get ahead and stay ahead. We do not deserve a criminal justice system that lets the wealthy and well-connected get off while doing violence to Black and brown communities and poor communities.
One of Bernie Sanders' top allies, Nina Turner, has announced she's running for Congress in Ohio to fill the seat of Marcia Fudge, who's been nominated to become housing secretary. Turner has a message for the new administration. There will be no honeymoon. She's part of a new effort to pressure the Biden-Harris team to enact a truly progressive agenda. Then we look at how immigrant rights activists are pushing Biden to enact a moratorium on deportations, rallying in his home city of Wilmington, Delaware.
We're coming down from 7 different states, all from the East Coast, all the way over here to his home, to making sure that, he doesn't forget our communities, doesn't forget the promises that he said that he was going to deliver on during his campaign trail. We're just weeks away from inauguration.
This comes as more than half of ICE immigration jails report coronavirus outbreaks, and ICE is punishing immigrants who protest for their release by putting them in solitary confinement. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Frontline health workers continue to receive the first wave of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine as the Moderna vaccine appears poised for authorization in the coming days. The hopeful news comes as the pandemic rages across the United States and officials warn the worst is yet to come. Over the past week, an average of more than 212,000 cases have been reported each day. Tuesday set a record for hospitalizations for the 10th day in a row at nearly 113,000. U.S. deaths Tuesday again topped 3,000, reaching the third highest daily death toll since the pandemic began. In Washington, D.C., the National Cathedral tolled its bells 300 times Tuesday evening to commemorate the 300,000 people in the United States who've died, as it did in September when the death toll topped 200,000. California's activated its mass fatality program as cases surge in the mostly locked-down state. This is Governor Gavin Newsom.
We have orders in 60 53-foot refrigerated storage units are currently standing by now in counties and at hospitals. We just had to order 5,000 additional body bags they just purchased for the state, and we just distribute them down to San Diego, Los Angeles, and counties. That should be sobering. In more medical news, the Food and Drug Administration's authorized the first rapid over-the-counter home coronavirus test. It does not require a prescription. Meanwhile, FDA staff are recommending watching for symptoms of Bell's palsy in Pfizer and Moderna vaccine recipients after a small number of trial participants got the condition. The FDA says it's not clearly a side effect of the vaccine, but warranted monitoring. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has finally acknowledged Joe Biden won the November election, 6 weeks after voting ended.
The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden
In a private call, the Senate Majority Leader urged Republican senators not to join a House Republican effort to try to overturn the Electoral College. President Trump lashed out at McConnell on Twitter and vowed to keep fighting to stay in office despite losing the Electoral College and losing the popular vote by over 7 million votes. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and Brazilian leader Jair Bolsonaro have all congratulated Biden following the Electoral College victory. This comes as plans are moving forward for Joe Biden's inauguration. On Tuesday, Biden's inaugural committee urged supporters to stay home on January 20th due to the pandemic. President-elect Joe Biden has picked former South Bend, Indiana mayor and former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg to be Secretary of Transportation. If confirmed, Buttigieg will be the first openly gay cabinet member in U.S. history. As Transportation Secretary, he'll oversee an agency with nearly 60,000 employees and a budget of over $72 billion. As mayor of South Bend, Buttigieg ran a city with a population of 100,000 people. During his presidential run, Buttigieg pushed for expanded funding for public transportation, but also more money for highways and driverless cars. Buttigieg previously worked as a management consultant for McKinsey & Company. Biden is also set to nominate former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm to be Secretary of Energy. Granholm has been a longtime advocate of renewable energy. Biden's also reportedly planning to tap former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy to oversee his domestic climate policy. Meanwhile, Politico reports Biden has quietly expanded his transition team to include veterans from Goldman Sachs, McKinsey & Company, Facebook, and Google. Hundreds of immigrant rights activists participated in a car caravan Tuesday to Joe Biden's hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, urging him to implement immigration reform, criminal justice reform, and cancel Puerto Rico's debt within his first 100 days in office. Martin Torres, a member of Make the Road Action, said, quote, "Our communities helped ensure Biden's victory. Now, as he prepares to take office, we urge him to work with us to deliver an overhaul of immigration enforcement, including the moratorium on deportations and a pathway to citizenship for all 11 million undocumented immigrants." In response to Tuesday's action, President-elect Biden acknowledged the critical role played by immigrant and communities of color in fighting against Trump's destructive policies. In a letter to the activists, Biden said, quote, "Please know you will always have a seat at the table." We'll have more on his policies later in the broadcast. Biden hit the campaign trail in Georgia Tuesday to urge people to vote for Democrats Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in next month's twin Senate runoffs, which will determine control of the Senate. Biden deplored the Senate stalemate over a new coronavirus relief package.
The United States Senate should have passed the coronavirus and economic relief package months ago. People are hurting, millions out of work, small businesses closing, people are struggling to pay their rent, worried that after Christmas they'll be thrown out before New Year's.
With just over 1 month left in his presidency, Trump is gutting the Endangered Species Act by rolling back habitat protections for at-risk species, including grizzly bears, whooping cranes, and Pacific salmon. The new rule narrows the definition of habitat to areas where species currently live, but not those where animals might move to because of the climate crisis or areas where they have previously lived that could be restored. The policy group Environment America said in a statement, quote, "Animals that have already lost so much of the land they once roamed, now they face an uphill climb from competition with invasive species, the effects of global warming, and the lack of genetic exchange between fractured habitats. This new rule ratchets up the danger, making even modest recovery efforts unworkable for many species that have already been decimated by human development," they said. In Bolivia, a scientific expedition in the Andes uncovered 20 previously unknown species. Scientists also saw plants and animals they had not seen for decades, some of which were believed to be extinct. Some of the new discoveries include the Bolivian flag snake and the Lilliputian frog. The expedition in the Zongo Valley near the capital La Paz took place in 2017, but the findings were just released this week. This is Eduardo Forno of Conservation International, which led the effort alongside the municipal government of La Paz.
A healthy forest is a forest that is going to have wonderful species like the ones we found in Zongo. It's going to have a lot more species than have been registered. 1,700 have been registered. What it is going to allow is to make sure that Zongo Valley is healthy, and that is a reflection of the need to have a healthy environment.
Prosecutors with the International Criminal Court have rejected calls from Uyghur exiles to investigate China for genocide. Exiled Uyghurs have accused Beijing of holding more than 1 million people from mostly Muslim minorities in re-education camps. The International Criminal Court said it was unable to act because the alleged crimes occurred in China, which is not a signatory to the ICC. This comes as China is facing new accusations of relying heavily on forced labor to pick cotton in the province of Xinjiang, which produces more than a fifth of the world's cotton. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court says there's, quote, reasonable basis to believe the Philippines has committed crimes against humanity as part of President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs, which has taken thousands of lives. The crimes include murder, torture, and serious physical and mental harm. The ICC will decide on whether it will undertake a formal investigation in the next year after the decision was delayed due to the pandemic. European Union and British regulators unveiled draft laws that seek to halt big tech monopolies as well as stop the spread of misinformation and harmful content online. The new rules are designed to rein in the power of so-called gatekeepers like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, and would impose hefty fines. The rules also offer a possible path to breaking up companies that repeatedly violate European antitrust laws. This is European Commissioner for Competition, Margrethe Vestager.
In this proposal, there is a sense of future-proofing, because it's also dynamic. We can do investigations, if it need be, so that we can see if gatekeepers are emerging, and we can put them then obligations. And this is, of course, because without enforcement, not worth much.
In immigration news, a new rule is set to go into effect, which would send some asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border to El Salvador, instead of letting them receive humanitarian protection in the United States. The Trump administration implemented similar deals with Guatemala and Honduras. Immigrant and human rights advocates say the policy puts already vulnerable migrants in dangerous situations. They don't have to be from El Salvador to be sent to El Salvador. The Minnesota Board of Pardons commuted the life sentence of Mayan Burrell, who walked free Tuesday after serving 18 years in prison. Burrell, who is black, was sentenced to life when he was just 16 years old for the 2002 murder of an 11-year-old girl who was killed by a stray bullet. Burrell has always maintained his innocence. His case was thrust into the national spotlight early this year as then-presidential candidate Senator Amy Klobuchar faced calls to suspend her campaign for leading the case against Burrell when she was Hennepin County's district attorney. An Associated Press investigation found there was no physical evidence linking Burrell to the crime and that Klobuchar may have mishandled the case. The decision to commute Burrell's sentence was made by Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. His sentence was shortened to 20 years, and he'll serve the remainder on supervised release. A warning to our audience. The following headline contains disturbing images of police violence. Shocking video has emerged from Chicago showing 9 police officers raiding the home of a 50-year-old African-American hospital social worker as she was preparing to go to bed. After breaking down her door, the police handcuffed the woman, who was naked, and held her for over 30 minutes before realizing they'd entered the wrong home. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot tried to block the release of the body cam footage from the 9 officers who took part in the 2019 raid. But a judge this week sided with the CBS outlet in Chicago, which then aired parts of the disturbing video along with an interview with the woman, Anjanette Young, who said she wanted the video to be shown.
You see them running up to the apartment complex with the battering ram in their hand, a crowbar. It was so traumatic to hear the way the thing was hitting the door. And it happened so fast, I didn't have time to put on clothes.
And suddenly, she found herself frozen in fear, completely naked, in a room full of men.
It occurred in February 2019, while Rahm Emanuel was still mayor of Chicago. A new report from the Economic Policy Institute finds farm workers in the U.S. have engaged in massive wage theft, and repeatedly violated. Let me repeat that. Finds that farm employers in the U.S. have engaged in massive wage theft and repeatedly violated federal labor laws around safety and wages. The report, based on data from the Labor Department, shows employers withholding at least $76 million in wages from over 150,000 workers over the past 20 years, though researchers say the problem is likely much bigger since the government only investigates a small number of farm employers at one time. Many violations are also not reported due to workers' immigration status. Recent research has found farm workers have been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus pandemic, yet many are forced to continue working in unsafe conditions. And here in New York City, transportation workers and allies are holding a rally today to call on the Metropolitan Transportation Authority to halt any planned layoffs, service cuts, and fare increases as part of an upcoming budget. MTA workers say they're bearing the brunt of massive losses due to the coronavirus crisis as they continue to provide vital services to the city, even as they were not given sufficient protections, including PPE, during the pandemic's first wave. This is MTA worker Jonathan Beatrice from the group Local 100 Fight Back.
They ultimately want us to pay for this crisis. They want us to pay for it. Not any of the 118 billionaires that live in New York, some of whom have profited from this crisis. They want to freeze our pay. They want to eliminate jobs. They want to lay us off. We need to come together and tell the MTA no.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. When we come back, we speak with one of Bernie Sanders' top allies, the former Ohio state legislator Nina Turner, who announced Tuesday she's running for Congress in Ohio. She's part of a new effort to pressure the Biden-Harris administration to enact a truly progressive agenda. Stay with us.
Dreaming in my dreaming of an aspect bright and fair, and my sleeping, it was broken, but my dreams, it lingered near in the form of shining palace where the pure air is recognized and my senses newly open as I awaken to the cry that the people have the power to redeem the work of fools upon me. The grace is showered, it's decreed. The people rule. Hey, hey, people have the power. People have
Candy Staten sings bringing people of the power. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan González in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, Nina Turner is running for Congress. The former Ohio state senator became a national figure as one of presidential candidate Bernie Sanders' most visible allies in his 2020 campaign national co-chair. On Tuesday, she announced she's now launching her own campaign.
Today, I am announcing my candidacy for Congress for the 11th Congressional District of Ohio.
Nina Turner is running to fill the seat left open by Congressmember Marcia Fudge, who was tapped by the Biden administration to be Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Turner is now the third candidate to announce their candidacy in the 11th District, following Cuyahoga Councilwoman, County Democratic Party Chair Shontel Brown, and former Ohio State Senator Jeff Johnson. Bernie Sanders, California Congressmember Ro Khanna, Congresswoman-elect from Missouri Cori Bush have all lined up to endorse Nina Turner's campaign. If elected, she'll join the growing progressive wing of the Democratic Party in Congress, which has been putting pressure on other lawmakers to pass a second coronavirus stimulus package amidst the largest spike in COVID infections since the start of the pandemic. The relief package currently being considered does not include direct COVID relief payments for American families, despite a surge in unemployment and evictions by the end of the month. Nina Turner's platform includes direct COVID relief payments, Medicare for all, free college, and a $15 an hour minimum wage. She's also been a vocal part of the movement to hold President-elect Joe Biden accountable to the grassroots organizers and communities that helped elect him. Nina Turner narrated a video released today titled "No Honeymoon."
CNN projects Joseph R. Biden Jr. is elected the 46th president of the United States.
No honeymoon. What do we mean by that? We mean that we, the people, hold the power, that we must continue to fight for what is just, right, and good, and fight against what is not just, right, and good. We mean that we must have solidarity and commitment one to another. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. What do we mean by that? That as long as there are injustices, we will continue to fight. What do we mean by that? We know that when everyday people put a little extra on their ordinary, extraordinary things happen.
The pressure on Biden starts now. We are holding him accountable because we got him elected.
We mean we will continue to pursue those things that lift and edify, and we will reject those things that do not. We mean that we will not be seduced by smiles. We need action, and we need it right now. We will not relent. And that's what we mean when we say no honeymoon.
No Honeymoon was produced by Roots Action. Nina Turner's campaign announcement comes as Biden announced more cabinet picks Tuesday. Former South Bend, Indiana mayor and presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg will be nominated to be Secretary of Transportation. Former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm has been tapped to be Secretary of Energy. Politico reports Biden has quietly expanded his transition team to include veterans from Goldman Sachs, McKinsey & Company, Facebook, and Google. Well, for more on the cabinet, coronavirus relief, and her run for Congress, Nina Turner joins us now from Cleveland, Ohio. We welcome you to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Former state legislator Nina Turner, can you talk about why you have thrown your hat in the ring?
Well, this moment calls for that. I mean, this is my home. I am a daughter of Cleveland. I've lived in the 11th Congressional District, served in this district as a councilwoman, as a state senator, as you have laid out. I was the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State in 2014, fighting against one of the worst secretaries of state in this country. All
What I've done heretofore has been because of my love for my community and my love for this nation to stand up and make sure that people understand that they deserve better than what they have been getting. I definitely congratulate Congresswoman Marsha Fudge for being tapped for the Secretary of HUD position. There has not been a Black woman, I believe, in that position in over 40 years, and the greater Cleveland area has a lot to be proud of. The state of Ohio has a lot to be proud of. But I'm running in service of the people, and we need more, not just bold voices, but people who will take action and will be fearless when it comes to standing up for what is just, for what is right, and for what is good. So in your title, Amy, and to Juan, good morning, Democracy Now!, we need this type of leadership right now.
Well, Nina Turner, do you expect much pushback from the Democratic establishment or possible even competitors on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party? There's been some talk that Dennis Kucinich, who had been toying with a possibility of running for mayor of Cleveland again, may also consider running for this seat as well?
Yes, that is true. The more the merrier. I mean, this is what democracy is all about. People should be able to run. You know, I don't come from the school that tries to push people out of an election.
And in terms of the key policies that you would,
the citizens.
We're having a little bit of a video stutter here, so sometimes you break up, Nina. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, in terms of some of the key policies that you would run as the plank of your campaign, could you talk about those?
Yes, $15 an hour minimum wage, a living wage. People deserve that. It is immoral how the working class of this nation from all backgrounds have steadily not, their wages have not kept pace with inflation. And so we have to, especially even before the pandemic, but especially now, how are people going to survive? And if you can't even survive, you'll never get to thrive. COVID relief, absolutely. It is immoral. And that is for both sides of the Congress and the current president, that there has not been a second stimulus package for the American people that contains direct payment. That is a must. It is a necessity. It's not a luxury. And we need to follow the lead of other industrialized nations who have set in place either folks get checks on a regular basis and or helping the businesses that employ them be able to. It is a shame that this hegemon nation has not done that heretofore, and we all should be ashamed.
A Democratic Congress member, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, talked about the COVID relief package during an Instagram live video last week. This is what she said.
What Mitch McConnell said is that we want to give big corporations total immunity for 5 years from COVID-related lawsuits. Now, if we do that, if we accept that for a one-time $1,200 check or a super short expansion of unemployment insurance, the deal is that you're going to end up behind. Because you may get one $1,200 check on one hand, but you may also get a multi-million-dollar hospital bill with no recourse and no ability to protect yourself from a negligent corporation or employer. And so that's not worth it, right? Your check is not worth your life.
So that is New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A bipartisan group of senators introduced a COVID relief bill Monday that does not include direct cash payments. It does include a so-called liability shield for businesses, which Republicans secured in exchange for agreeing to approve funding for local and state governments. Bernie Sanders says he will not support a bill that includes this corporate liability shield. You have Congress that has a majority of members who are millionaires saying no to, at this point, COVID stimulus, though McConnell now says he will move forward, though he's absolutely insisting on this shield for corporations. Talk Talk about the significance of this and what exactly you want to see in a stimulus package.
I definitely, Amy, want to see the guaranteed basic income, not a one check. You know, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is absolutely correct. That one-time check does nothing, even if it was in there. We need guaranteed basic income, especially for the magnitude of this particular crisis. Amy and Juan, it shows a heartlessness. And you want to talk about a shield for businesses? What about the shield for the American people? What about the shield for folks who are facing eviction? What about the shield for people who go to bed hungry every night? What about the shield for the homeless? This is a heartless way to do the people's business, their bidding. And the American people are going to have to stand up and say, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. How heartless do you have to be to care more about industry and corporations than you do about the everyday people of this nation, Amy? This cannot continue. And the healthcare portion of it, absolutely right. We need Medicare for all right now. We needed it before the pandemic. We especially need it right now. And we know that millions, almost 14, 15 million people have lost their employer-sponsored, air quote, health care, on top of the millions of people, almost 97 million or so people who are already uninsured or underinsured. This is a crisis of epic proportions. It was a crisis before the COVID, and it is especially a crisis right now, and it cannot be tolerated. It cannot stand. And we got to fight.
Well, Nina Turner, the latest reports coming out of Washington last night were suggesting that the compromise effort would separate this stimulus into two bills. One that would include the federal aid to cities and states and the liability shield for corporations, and the separate one that would deal with assistance to ordinary Americans. Admittedly, it would only have $300 in additional unemployment benefits instead of the $600 from last time, but it would include some rental assistance and some food assistance. Do you think it's advisable, if you were in Congress right now, to go ahead and pass the bigger bill and then wait until the new Congress comes in January to decide on the liability shield and the municipal assistance?
Well, they shouldn't be connecting that liability shield to the municipal assistance. You know, as a state senator, had to deal often with cuts to local governments. And to put those two things together, Juan, we know exactly why they're doing it. They're playing games with the American people. You know, this is a complicated issue. I believe firmly that we have to get the checks. The $300 is certainly not enough at all. As a matter of fact, we're going backwards and not going forward. And we got to awaken the sleeping giants in this country, Juan. It's unacceptable. American people, and I know COVID is out there, and I don't want anybody to get COVID, but we got to stand up strong, and we got to find a way to make it known that this kind of throwing crumbs, if you will not be tolerated. We need a social contract. That is our money, Juan and Amy, our money. And I want the American people to understand that you got people in the Congress, in both chambers, who are playing games with our money. That money should be given back to the American people that fund this nation, period. So it just cannot be accepted.
This is former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders speaking to MSNBC about the incoming Biden administration's cabinet.
I've seen some good appointments, people that I like. I think people who are really, really smart, experienced, but I have not seen people from the progressive movement per se in that cabinet.
So there's Bernie Sanders. You were co-chair of his national campaign, looking for progressive representation at the cabinet level. He was pushing, apparently, very hard for labor secretary. Any word if that is going to happen, Nina Turner? And then if you can respond to the Joe Biden saying, you know, pushing people to back off before the January 5th runoff election, senatorial races in Georgia that'll determine the balance of the Senate. You just narrated that film that says no honeymoon. So first, What would Bernie Sanders as labor secretary mean, and are you satisfied with the cabinet so far?
Having Senator Sanders as labor secretary would change everything. As we know, the senator has always been committed to the House of Labor. Even in this last presidential run, when the Walmart workers could have from any of the 25 or so candidates running on the Democratic side, they chose Senator Bernie Sanders to come to that meeting of stakeholders and represent them. He has been on the streets with the House of Labor. So not just in the House of Representatives and now the Senate talking about it, he has been on the streets with the workers. He is the ultimate champion of the workers. And so his vision for labor, the $15 an hour minimum wage, making sure people have a right to form a union, you name it, he's been there. He would be an extraordinary labor secretary. In terms of the cabinet picks so far, I mean, yes, I certainly agree with the senator. There have not been a lot of progressives put up thus far. We got to do better. I mean, I would love to see stratification economist Dr. Derek Hamilton, Dr. Deborah Verholten, people like Michael Render, AKA Killer Mike. Oh my God, what kind of cabinet would that be? Certainly members of Congress like Congresswoman Barbara Lee or Congresswoman Karen Bass. Those are the other types of people that they should be looking at to put in that cabinet so that he has people in there with a robust commitment who will not flinch to lead and to serve, but to clearly be on the side of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in this country. That is what we need, Amy, and I don't see that thus far.
I wanted to ask you about the issue of immigration. We're seeing reports now of increasing surge of migrants coming to the Mexican border, trying to cross the Mexican border. Obviously, there have been a few major hurricanes in Central America that have devastated huge portions of Central America. What kind of advice or pressure would you put on President Biden at this point as to what he should do in terms of reversing the immigration policies of President Trump, especially given the fact that we may be facing a new surge of migrants at the border?
Yeah, absolutely, Juan. So that's job number one. Whatever he can do via executive order to overturn or reverse rather what President Trump has done in his heartless administration should be done. But more, and then beyond that, we have to deal with the climate crisis that in many ways is driving this. There's a push and pull factor that happens when you have this kind of disruption. So whether it's famine, whether it is the weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, you're going to have people all over the world who need relief. And so in that particular case, the president-elect needs to bring together world leaders so that we can deal with this issue, climate crisis and immigration on whole, we can deal with as a world, because the United States, should certainly be one of the many leaders, not the only one, but one of the many leaders that deals with these types of complex issues that impact the everyday lives of our sisters and brothers all over the world. We should do that as a collective, as a coalition. That is how we're going to build the type of strength that we need not only in our country, but in the world. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, what happens to one directly happens to us all indirectly. And the COVID virus has certainly shown that, the pandemic has shown that, and the climate crisis that we have that is driving most of this, not all of it, has shown that as well. And so it needs a national and a worldwide response.
In 2000,
and speaking of the COVID crisis you mentioned, the reports in the New York Times today say that the wealthy nations of the world have basically been locking up the supplies of vaccines that are coming out right now to deal with the pandemic. It says Canada has already locked up the ability to contracts to inoculate their people 5 times over their population. The United States 3 times over its population. The European Union and the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, the nations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, very few of them have been able to obtain supplies of the vaccine until possibly 2022. Could you talk about the inequity here of who's going to be getting these vaccines?
it is the height of inequity, but it is a formula that has been carried out throughout the history of this world. You leave the black and brown nations in peril, vulnerable, and nations that are primarily white or European, they get to lock it up. That cannot stand either, because again, the connection, we are certainly citizens of our respective nations, but we're also citizens of the world. And another example of what affects one directly affects us all indirectly is called a pandemic for a reason. And so world leaders, to be that's a level of selfishness that will impact everybody. So we can run, but we can't hide. So those nations that have locked up the vaccine in that way may think what they're doing is okay and good for their citizens, but ultimately it is not, because the pandemic has shown very clearly that there is no border when it comes to something of this magnitude. It's the wrong thing to do, Juan, and it must be, we got to stand up against that as well. We can't accept that. So the nations of, Canada and the United States and others, that can't sit well with us.
And finally, Nina Turner, in 2014, Cleveland police officer Timothy Lohman shot Tamir Rice within 2 seconds of arriving at a park where he was playing with a pellet gun. He was 12 years old. When Tamir's 14-year-old sister rushed to her brother's side, they tackled her to the ground, handcuffed her, and put her in their cruiser. Tamir Rice died the next day. Neither officer was indicted. Very quietly, in October, the Trump administration ended a civil rights investigation into the police killing of Rice. The New York Times reports the Justice Department ignored pleas by career prosecutors to open a grand jury probe into Rice's killing for more than 2 years before denying the request in 2019. Nina Turner, we went with you in 2016 during the Democratic National Convention in Cleveland to that park, and you showed us where Tamir Rice was shot by police. If you could finally talk about the issue of defunding the police and also the fact that Joe Biden says no to defunding the police and no to Medicare for all.
Well, Amy, the Medicare for all is totally unacceptable in every way. I know some folks don't want to use the term defund the police, but we have a crisis in this country that is a long time in the making. None of this stuff happened overnight. And Amy, you're absolutely right. I mean, I know my face cannot be seen right now, but yes, you and I were at that park. I was on the last term of my Senate term in 2014 when that happened. It was in November. And I called then Governor John Kasich, and I didn't call him as a state senator. I called him as a black mother in America. And I think I shared some of this with you, Amy. And I said, Governor, we got to do something. We cannot let folks explode in this state, and they have every reason to do so. We got to let them know that we hear their cries. What happened to Tamir Rice could have happened to my son, to any other black mother's or black father's son, and it cannot stand at all. I mean, we have to do something. And to his credit, he did. And that is how we were able to launch the Task Force on Community Police Relations. And for the first time in the history of our state, to have standards by which law enforcement agencies have to abide by and have the community be able to judge them and critique whether or not they are answering to those standards. Amy, a crisis in this nation, a long time coming, generationally, the way that police and then other law enforcement agencies were set in this country, never to really protect and serve the black community, but rather to be there to lord over the black community historically. And that is embedded in the DNA of this country. And let me say this, because my husband is a retired police officer. Our son is in law enforcement right now. So I get this in a very unique way, both wanting and understanding that the really very real dangers of being out there to try to protect and serve those who have the mindset to do so. And then understanding that both of my black men have been racially profiled throughout their life. We have got to, as a nation, rethink policing in this country. We have got to put the requisite resources in mental health, the requisite resources in education, the requisite resources in making sure that people have a job, the requisite resources in making sure that people can live in safe communities. We need to overhaul the entire system. It's not just what happens in policing. It is what happens when judges and prosecutors, it is the entire system. Some people may call that defund the police. The more important aspect here is that we must totally reform, and some people would say transform
and destroy and rebuild the way that the legal system works in this country.
Nina Turner, we're going to have to leave it there, but we expect to be talking to you soon in the future. Candidate for Ohio's 11th congressional seat announced yesterday. She's former national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign, former Ohio State Senator. When we come back, immigrant rights activists are pushing Biden to enact a moratorium on deportations and release people from immigrant jails. Stay with us.
Señor presidente, le vengo a avisar, no tengo papeles para trabajar. Presidente, pregunto por qué matan al moreno con piel de café. Si fuera presidente, honestamente, si fuera presidente, para mi gente, si fuera presidente, honestamente, presidente, para mi gente.
Check 1, 2. You see if I was president, I'd roll up my sleeves.
President by Las Cafeteras, performing the song in the Democracy Now! Studios in 2017. This is Democracy Now!, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan González. President-elect Joe Biden promised to reverse Trump's most restrictive immigration policies during his 2020 campaign. But since he was elected, Biden has not included immigration among his top 4 priorities: the pandemic, economic recovery, racial equity, and climate change. Well, on Tuesday, hundreds of immigrant activists and their allies caravaned through Biden's home city of Wilmington, Delaware, where they demanded he issue a moratorium on deportations and advance a path to citizenship for undocumented people within his first 100 days in office. This is Yetziri Tovar and with Make the Road Action.
We are in Rodney Square, and this is in Wilmington, Delaware. And the reason why we chose to be here is because this is where President-elect Biden is living right now. And so what better way to make sure that our voices are being heard than coming down to his hometown. And we're coming down from 7 different states, all from the East Coast, all the way over here to his home, to making sure that, he doesn't forget our communities, doesn't forget the promises that he said that he was going to deliver on during his campaign trail. We're just weeks away from inauguration.
President-elect Biden sent a letter to the organizers of the event, writing, quote, "The work of realizing our shared vision is before us. The good and necessary work that will lead to an immigration system that's fair, humane, and that reflects our values as a nation of immigrants," he wrote. Caravanners also stopped at Hudson County Jail in New Jersey, not far from the Bergen County Jail. Both jails contract with ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, to hold immigrants who have civil immigration cases, not criminal charges. Over the weekend, police fired smoke grenades at a solitary rally outside the Bergen County Jail where they arrested 9 people. Tuesday, the Archdiocese of Newark signed onto a statement calling for, quote, "the immediate release of the men on hunger strike and of all people at the Bergen County Jail to protect their health and well-being." This comes as more than half of ICE's immigration detention jails are currently reporting coronavirus outbreaks. On Tuesday, protesters also gathered outside the Northwest Detention Center run by Geo Group in Tacoma, Washington, where another detainee there tested positive for the coronavirus that causes COVID-19, bringing the number up to at least 22. In this recording from inside the ICE jail from December 10th, you can hear a guard telling people detained in the same dorm that they'll be separated into individual cells. This is Captain Leroy Portillo. Listen very carefully.
Everybody's going to be going to the same dorm. The only difference is that you're going to be going into the individual cells.
Each person is going to be in their own cell, only while we quarantine, you understand? It is a precaution you need to take to protect the life and health of each person here. It is very important. If you don't, you are at risk in here, because someone has tested positive, and they're still here.
The Northwest Detention Center is run by the private prison company Geo Group, which issued a statement that it's, quote, taken extensive measures to ensure the health and safety of those in our care and our employees who are on the front lines making daily sacrifices at the center, they said. ICE also reported a contract pharmacy technician had become the 8th worker at the jail to test positive. For more, we go to Seattle, where we're joined by Maru Mora Villalpando, co-founder of La Resistencia. She is herself undocumented. Also with us, Manuel Abrego. He is head of La Resistencia's phone support system for people held in the Tacoma ICE Processing Center. He was released from there in 2018 after being held in solitary confinement for 8 months for going on a hunger strike. Both Maru and Manuel are featured in a new report in the Progressive magazine headlined Hunger for Justice, written by Democracy Now! Co-news director Renee Feltz. Welcome both to Democracy Now! Maru, let's begin with you. Explain what's going on in this jail and where you are in Tacoma and what you're demanding.
Has seen a spread of the virus of coronavirus. We have seen since October and November the spreading of the virus not only for people in detention but even employees both of GEO and ICE. We know that information thanks to the people in detention that has reached out to us and given us this information, in this way pressuring ICE to actually release information to the public and to a judge because there's some pending litigation. What we know right now in Tacoma is that we finally have confirmation of at least one person that while in detention, while in quarantine, tested positive. ICE kept arguing that the only people with COVID in detention were those that they brought from mostly Department of Correction, custody, other prisons either here in Washington or Oregon. They were saying that they were able to contain the virus, and this proves it's not true. This latest case. Also, the fact that guards and employees of ICE are bringing in the virus, they're testing positive and yet coming to work. We just learned last night that some people that were working in the kitchen were asked not to come to work, because remember, they get paid $1 a day, to not go back to the kitchen because it seemed that they have been in contact with somebody else detained, or possibly an employee that has tested positive for COVID-19. And, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen this constant organizing and resistance from people in detention, staging hunger strikes. I believe this is the 5th or 6th hunger strike. I actually lost count. But what we know since last night is that at least 5 people have now joined a hunger strike. One of them has now today reached 13 days of hunger strike. And he actually messaged us last night saying that he's being harassed by the medical staff, saying if he continues his hunger strike while in medical isolation, he will be losing his case. It will have an impact on his immigration case, and he will lose and get deported.
And Maru, could you talk about how ICE releases people, including there was a man they released this past Friday night at 9 p.m. in the evening. Could you talk about how they deal with these cases?
This is very unique. We have never seen such a thing. We've been doing this for such a long time, and we know that ICE releases people. They get them ready. They call them to an area that is called intake, sometimes around 11 in the morning or so, and they spend there some hours. And around 3 to 7 p.m., people get released throughout the afternoon, early evening. Yet last Friday, somebody texted me in the middle of the night, close to midnight, but I didn't see the text until Saturday morning, because we actually had to drive somebody to the airport very early to also go home. He had also been released on Friday. They actually were in the same pod. So I was able to go pick him up Saturday morning at 7 in the morning outside the Northwest Detention Center. It was 34 degrees. He had spent the night outside the detention center in a tent that was set up for an organization that welcomes people as they get released from detention, and they give them clothing and that sort of thing. And because of COVID, they set up a tent because they cannot have people inside an RV they have set up there. So he literally spent the night inside the tent. And when I arrived to pick him up, it was extremely cold. He was wearing only a sweater. He was not wearing a mask. This was total retaliation because he had been organizing, he had been supporting other people, he had been helping other people file documents to get released. And this is just ridiculous that ICE will release somebody so late at night knowing there's nobody out there. The detention center is in nowhere. There's no bus stations. There's nothing. It's a dead end. It's an industrial zone. This guy came from Alaska. He had no idea where he was. He got lucky that his cell phone worked so he can reach me. And in the morning, I was able to pick him up.
And what's the response of ICE to those who do attempt to either go on hunger strike or organize within the detention centers?
Immediate retaliation. Right now, we've seen that a lot of people have stopped eating, not because they're on hunger strike. It's just because they don't want to eat the food. The things are getting so bad in the detention center that they are told immediately, so you're not eating, then you're going to go to the hall, which is, the way people know the solitary confinement. So what people have told us is that they literally go and grab the tray from the food cart and they just put the tray back. Just to make sure that ICE doesn't think that they're on hunger strike, yet they're not eating. But people are afraid, definitely afraid.
I want to bring Manuel Abrego into this conversation. You have firsthand experience of being in the hole of solitary confinement. I mean, these are civil jails. The crimes being charged are some kind of violation of immigration status. And here you were put in the solitary confinement for 8 months. What is it like there? And what are you hearing now that you've been released because of national outcry about how you were held from the people you're taking calls from?
So the cells are small cells, they're like 9 by 12. So you don't have anything in there. It's just you and yourself, They don't let you use the phone anytime you want to. They don't let you come out yourself. It's like 23 hours a day you are in the cell just for complaining or protesting for what you believe is wrong, So they also give you the right to protest, in ICE rules. They say, okay, you can protest, you can participate in a hunger strike if you don't, if you don't think that, if you think that your rights are being violated. They give you the right to do that, but at the same time, they take it away from you because they put you in segregation and they scare you with that,
And Manuel, we have about a minute left, but could you talk about what you're hearing on the hotline from people who are still in that Northwest Detention Center?
Yeah, they're all scared of being in there right now because of COVID. And also, when they get quarantined, they put you in segregation. It's like segregation. You go in there and they don't have no contact with anyone. So we are their voice outside. And it's like they getting punished for everything that's going on, with the COVID and for their hunger strikes and everything. So they all worry. They don't even want to eat because they think they're going to get infected. If someone is in the kitchen infected, we just got news yesterday also that someone in the kitchen tested positive for COVID. So that's what's going on in there right now.
And Madhu, in the last 30 seconds that we have, could you talk about what you hope President-elect Biden does when he gets inaugurated on these detention centers?
He cannot keep using us, Latinx and immigrants, as a political prop. He needs to deliver. We expect him to do, in his first 100 days, a moratorium on all deportations. And that doesn't mean keeping people sitting in detention while deportations don't happen. He needs to create a process to release absolutely every one of the detention centers, shut down all detention centers, not only the private ones, begin a process for abolishing ICE, so we can also go into a process of healing, which means reparations for absolutely everybody that's been in detention and has been suffering the cruelty of ICE and ICE detention.
We want to thank you both for joining us. And, of course, we're going to continue to cover this issue. Maru Mora Villalpando and Manuel Abrego are with the immigrant rights group La Resistencia in Seattle, Washington. And a happy birthday to our Democracy Now! Co-news director, Renee Feltz. Democracy Now! Is produced with Renee Feltz, Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Libby Rainey, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Teresena, Carla Wills, Tammy Warrenoff, Tarina Nadura, Sam Alcoff, Tamery Astudio, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Honey Massoud, and Adriano Contreras. Our general manager is Julie Crosby. Special thanks to Becca Stelly, Miriam Barnard, Paul Powell, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Hugh Grand, Dennis Moynihan, David Prude, and Dennis McCormick. Stay safe, wear a mask. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan González.